Hello, welcome to those that are joining us for the first time. Welcome to World Sustainable Procurement Day. For those that have been with us for a while already, it's amazing how long 24 hours is. I feel like we've been live for a long time already. I know the team have been already staying up all night to run some sessions. We've had child labour, we've had challenges of sustainable packaging, we've had CPOs, we've had all sorts of academics and experts sharing with us already. And we haven't even begun to get started. So thank you all for joining us. My name's Oliver Hurry. I'm on the steering team of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, proudly wearing my hoodie for the 24 hours today, and delighted that you can all join us. Now it's the turn of the travel and hospitality sector. So one of the chapters, one of the industry groups within the SPP, one of the very first that we created is with the travel and hospitality industry. And I think that's for a number of reasons. One is that it's critical to the global economy, it's critical to the way the world works, and it's critical to sustainability. And there are a lot of challenges, a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, a lot of opportunities, a lot of innovations happening. So I think it's very exciting to have this panel. And I'm joined by a pretty epic three, really, almost perfectly designed this panel if we're going to talk about travel and hospitality, and particularly the collaboration nature of the travel and hospitality industry. Then what better to have one of the best airlines, one of the best airports, one of the best ground handlers with us as well. So we'll be introducing and in fact, you can even hear planes taking off. That's how authentic this is. So it's great to hear. We do want to hear from you, the audience, as well, particularly if you're in the travel and hospitality industry. But equally, if you're not, we're hoping that some of the lessons we'll get from today will be transferable to other lessons, to other industries, I should say. Do put your questions and answers into the chat. There is no such thing as a stupid question, so please put that in there. If you've got some thoughts, or you've got some links, or you've got some ideas, put those in the chat as well, because all of this is not just us on the panel, it's about you as well. So please add your thoughts here as well. So who have we got with us? So we've got Paul Doherty from Heathrow Airport. We've got Julien Lombiers from Air France KLM. And we have Nadia from Swissport International. So no excuses of not having the perfect panel here. We've got procurement and sustainability working together as well. So to start us off, I think we should start perhaps with the CPO and the airline. Julien, maybe you can tell a little bit of introduction to yourself, but also what you guys are doing as well. Perhaps you can start us off.
Yeah, thank you, Ollie, and it's sort of very exciting to be here today. And congratulations, I think, with a very exciting World Sustainable Procurement Day 2020. I must confess I haven't sort of been awake the whole night, but I'm sure sort of all the topics are sort of super exciting. Hey, my name is Julien Lombiers. I'm the CPO for Air France KLM. And obviously, sustainable procurement is at the core of our strategy, not only within procurement, but also at the airline. And maybe a few words on that. I think we've seen a massive shift in the airline industry, where over the last couple of years, I think there's really a change of mind, and more airlines really recognizing the need to commit to a journey towards net zero and supply chain and transparency. And if I speak for myself personally, I think that's super exciting, but also needed, to keep our license to operate. And another way to think about it is, I mean, that is not something we can do on our own. In order ultimately to get a person from one place to another place, there's sort of many sort of supply chains within this bigger supply chain that need to work. I mean, that could be the airport, and that could be the ground handler, that could be the aerospace industry. So in a way, I see my role as well as coordinating across those various supply chains that we collaborate. And if we do that together, and I think that's sort of certainly the theme of today, if we do that together, I think there's a huge opportunity to do that faster and with more success. Having worked a larger part of my career in fast-moving consumer goods, I think they figured this out quite early on. So I'm also inspired by what other industries are doing, and again, sort of applying that to to the airline industry.
Excellent. Thanks, Julian. And of course, you as an airline are inextricably linked to other companies, particularly when people think about their supply chain emissions and their Scope 3 emissions. Then you and your peers here on the panel are inextricably linked. So I'm hoping that those listening in will learn a little bit from you as well. So over to Nadia next. I would say you are a critical organisation when it comes to the operation and the flow of passengers and well, all sorts of materials and things like that around the world. So tell us more about your role and what you do.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Oliver. So I've been working with Swissport for over 10 years and in many different roles, being in finance or in more operational roles. I've taken the challenge to implement and drive the ESG agenda a year and a half ago. Today I'm heading the ESG agenda, the overall strategy, but as well I have an operational element, which is on the execution side. I was recently appointed as global head of fleet and as well lounges. So the interesting part is that ESG is de facto from the beginning really inserted into our business model with the ability to drive, design, and put this at the core of our strategy, but as well enables the execution of it, which is quite an unusual setup, I would say. So that's basically the honor I have is really to lead a fantastic team of and mixed team of really business, but as well more long-term thinking about ESG. And today I'm really glad to see that we have the whole or a huge part of the ecosystem actually that we are in. And I will only echo what my colleague Jurian was mentioning. That's really about how do you fit in the ecosystem from a business perspective, and then build on the current industry to ensure that we are aligned when it comes as well to our targets in emissions reductions, as an example, but as well on how do we collaborate and push each other's in a way that we just enhance the impact of what we are doing. So if I think about ground handling, we are central in the ecosystem, but as well we are highly dependent on what the airport is doing and what the airlines are doing. And equally themselves, they are dependent on what we do, depending on the level of scopes. So there is no other way than actually to create platforms. So today, for instance, platforms of discussion, but as well platforms where we can agree on the execution and ensure alignment, not to make any mistakes or enhance one pillar rather than another, to just make sure that we reinforce our power of execution. That's basically the message. And I'm really glad to be part of these panels with my colleagues.
Yeah, thanks, Nadia. That's great. I don't think there's many industries that are as collaborative and as competitive in the same breath as hospitality. It's a sort of strange feeling where I think mainly the consumers don't realise quite how much collaboration is essential, quite how much collaboration goes on, but also how competitive it can be. It's an interesting tension. And I guess, Paul, you feel that every day. I mean, Heathrow is permanently in competition with the other world's hubs, but you have to compete and collaborate in equal measure with everyone around you. And of course, Heathrow plays such a sort of quite iconic role in the role of the UK's sustainability and particularly in that of London, I guess.
Morning, Oliver. Morning, everyone. Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose the competition angle on an agenda like this is actually a fascinating one between airlines, airports, ground handlers, in that there are certain things you compete on and there are certain things that you don't, that actually as an industry you need to take a step forward on together. And My experience so far, even with those hubs, is that this is something that we have to take a step forward on together. So that's that kind of protecting your IP and your competitive edge doesn't feature quite as strongly in this agenda as other ones. I suppose just to introduce myself a little bit, I'm the procurement director here at Heathrow, and my teams look after all of the kind of the capital infrastructure and capital build that we do. All of our operational procurement and everything to do with technologies and our corporate services sits within my teams. And I'm probably just going to echo quite a lot my colleagues' points around collaboration and the fact that as we've gone through the journeys, which I'm sure we'll come on to discuss in terms of some of the initiatives and some of the things that we've worked on, they all started with kind of collaboration at the center of them. I think the journey piece in all of this is the adding professional to the first part of collaboration, because the collaboration and just agreeing that everyone's doing the best that they can do is lovely and wonderful. But there is a point of professional collaboration, especially on an ESG agenda, where we need to be able to turn around to partners and our general community around us and ask whether they're doing as much as they can do. If you happen to be at the top end of a performance metric, well, what could you move on to next, rather than rest on your laurels and build on your strengths? And that's a really interesting set of conversations that we're having at the moment around, we understand where your business has set its targets, but actually we'd like you to be more ambitious than that, and we believe that you can push further ahead. So again, echo everything around collaboration. We as an airport are so dependent on those who we work with, those who we work for, to be successful in all of these places. But we have to have the right chemistry amongst all of that to be able to be challenging, professional, difficult when it comes down to being difficult, but with everyone focused in the right direction from an intent perspective. Then again, given the agenda, we should be on fertile ground.
Absolutely. Lovely. So I'm going to come to each of you in a second to talk maybe a little bit more about specifically what you're doing in your businesses and particularly around collaboration. But I guess reflecting on our audience today. So our audience are mainly procurement professionals. They may well be in the travel and hospitality sector, so they'll probably want to hear a little bit about what their peers are doing. But I suspect many are also from other sectors as well. So we ought to think about what sort of transferable lessons there are for other industries. And I suspect probably one of the biggest things we'll talk about is value chain collaboration and working together as a group. So we should maybe reflect on that. But there may also be people who are interested more about some of the challenges and some of the issues, some of the stuff that is really tricky. And of course, you have the elephant in the room about travel and hospitality and flying and emissions and aviation and everything else, and what that means, for the future of the planet. So we mustn't dodge that, and I'm sure we'll get to that towards the end, but I'm looking forward to this. So Jurian, maybe we can start with you. The airline industry does. Again, when I think of collaboration and competition, probably closely more than ever. And it sounds like there's even more fresh collaboration happening right now.
Yeah, let me talk about a couple of examples, but first maybe bring to life the key pillars of our sustainability strategy. So as many of you know, we are investing a lot in new generation planes. Yeah, so specifically, end of last year, we made a commitment to make the change from the 737 to the Airbus Neo. That's sort of more than a $10 billion investment, driving 15% CO2 reduction, 20% noise. And this year we made a commitment to change our 747 cargo freighters to the new Airbus 350, driving 40% reduction CO2. So very sizable investments in general. Yeah, we want to move from something like 16% next generation in planes last year towards 64% next generation in 2028 already, still this decade. On top, we are front runners in SAF. We were the first commercial airline ever to fly on SAF. We are still proud to be the one pioneering sustainable aviation fuel. So we are at the moment building lots of partnerships where we are really pioneering the industry. We've pledged to at least go to 10% in 2030. The extra cost is an enormous amount. So we're really reflecting internally also what is our consumer proposition. But we're very excited to see more and more corporates sort of really stepping forward and say, hey, we'd like to help you and drive that sustainable journey together, funding some of this SAF on cost. But particularly if you think about technology development, moving away from HEFA technology into ultimately power to liquid is super, super important for the industry. In terms of collaboration, maybe some fresh news that I wanted to share with you from last week. We have kicked off something that we call the Sustainable Airline Initiative. Really making things a bit easier on the way we look at supply chain assessments. And the idea is that with a small group of airlines, but hopefully small, not staying small and growing over time, to unite behind one way of doing assessments. And I think the exciting thing here is that if there's one assessment, in this case from EcoVadis, that is valid for one of the participating airlines, that is an assessment that's valid for all participating airlines. You can see that Air France, KLM, including Transavia, Delta, and Virgin are the founders of the Sustainable Airline Initiative. On top, also IAG has not joined yet, but they are using EcoVadis, so that makes 3 out of the 6 largest global airlines putting their hands together and say, we want to make this easier for our various partners in the supply chains. We'd like to ask everybody to unite behind sort of one assessment. And Air France KLM has been the airline that has already been using these assessments for the last 10 years. And what we see, and which is encouraging, is that each and every year we do the reassessment, we see the awareness going up, we see the scores going up, which really means it drives action and supply chain and transparency. Maybe the other thing to highlight as well, which is again something quite exciting, and last year done for the first time, we've been pioneering the concept of a sustainable flight challenge. The newer generations would call that the airlines battle between themselves. And it's sort of 16 airlines that have started a competition, a challenge to innovate and fly certain routes. And then we measure the CO2 impact, other innovation, collaboration. And the goal is between those 16 airlines to then co-share the innovation that's being generated. So one of the ideas which I really liked was, why don't we change from catering in the airplane to catering at the gate? Which is a mind-blowing idea, actually, because people have more choice. You probably have less waste. Anyway, that's sort of one of the ideas that we are pioneering at these sort of flight challenges. But it's 16 airlines at the moment. Again, it will take place in May, so 2 months from now. And we'd like to make this an annual event where airlines really, not only from SkyTeam, but from each of the global alliances can take place.
Yeah, it's great. I like that, especially if it removes that opportunity to eat your dinner while squashed in to an airline seat. I think so anything that can help with that. I think it's a great example of some of the innovation and it changing that mindset about flying, because I think consumers increasingly are willing to sort of see differences in the way that that's done, and it's great to see. I think your example of industry collaboration there in collaborating on assessments and engagement of suppliers is something that I would highlight. I mean, I famously talk about the fact that I've got a Google Doc of 187 different sustainable procurement initiatives in the world. Almost everyone that's listening in, regardless of what industry you're in, there is an industry initiative somewhere that could help you collaborate with your peers to engage your suppliers, and everyone should be doing it, regardless of industry, almost. So I'd recommend that. I think it's a great example of what everyone should be doing, and regardless of the platform and the technology. I mean, that's always up for debate, but the realities are you should be definitely collaborating. I think it's a great example, Julian.
And Ollie, just one thing to add here. I mean, as we were announcing last week, the Sustainable Airline Initiative, we were fortunate enough to have the aerospace industry doing the same.
Brilliant.
Now they have a industry platform called IAEG, the International Airlines Environmental Group, and I think it's a real opportunity to, if you look to the airline industry and the various supply chains, see what other supply chains are where we could do that. Maybe in the airports, maybe with the ground handlers. We already know that the hotel industry, the hospitality industry, is also forming a sector initiative on assessment. So certainly an open invite for other airlines, if they're listening, to join, and other supply chains to jump on the train here as well.
Absolutely. Very little excuses not to, I would suggest as well. They should be thinking about it already. Nadia, maybe we can come to you as well next in terms of your role. Now, again, I suppose the work that you do, the ground handling, isn't as obvious necessarily to consumers about what it is that actually happens and how you work. But what are some of the things that you guys have been doing, whether it's collaborative or not, to drive sustainability?
So we try to be as collaborative as possible, just as a starting point. So for Swissport, basically, the agenda was set, or the 6 pillars. So we have 6 pillars were set based on what the airline industry is doing. So based on our customers' agenda and based on our airport's agenda. So we did quite a lot of work to actually look at what is important for the industry and for the overall ecosystem before actually setting up our targets. So we obviously have defined that decarbonization is the main challenge, but as well the main focus area for the industry. So we are putting quite a lot of initiatives around it. As I said in the beginning, in my introduction, obviously I am leading the fleet for Swissport, and this is where most of our emissions are coming from. So one of the focus area was to identify all the fleets that we can electrify. So where the supply chain is ready. So we have some equipment that cannot be electrified today, and some others that actually provides a positive business case, which is, I think, quite important as well, to ensure that what we are doing is not going to be a lost investment in 5 years or not providing the right economic value, together with obviously the decarbonization target. So we are heavily focusing on that. As well, we have cargo operations, as you know. So we are looking at building or transforming as a proof of concept one of our cargo operations into a fully sustainable place, to have to actually afterwards roll it out in our 130 cargo places we have. We do lounges as well. So in lounges, and that joins what Jurian was mentioning before about the catering. So we are looking at our plastic use and how we can transform the whole customer journey in our lounges globally. So we are implementing initiatives to drive zero plastic use in lounges, but as well in our cargo sheds. And the challenge, if I may, is that in reality, this is about changing our processes. So it's not only about looking at the incremental changes that we need to make, but it's as well changing the way that our people work. So, and now we are getting into the heart of the business model and really looking at how do you embed your sustainability agenda to drive the change of your business model, because that's actually the equation that we need to basically a solution. So that's I would say that's basically the direction of travel. Jurian, you mentioned EcoVadis. So as Swissport, as I said before, we have put a heavy weight on our ESG agenda for the last year and a half. So we are a little bit let's say, not at the same timeline as my colleagues. So we are, this year, we are looking for the EcoVadis certification because we know that it's important for our airlines, but as well for airports. And we believe that's the way to go for us in Swissport. But in the same time, there is another observation on the industry collaboration. So as ground handlers, we are, or at least so far, we were missing the space where we could align and discuss about how we are going to drive the sustainability agendas in each of our companies. And we are setting up via our ground handling association, working groups and boards to ensure that that we align as well as ground handlers on the minimum standards. Because we believe that this is the way that we are going, as I said before, to push each other's for like higher quality, but as well to compete on a let's say on what is good, basically, right? So it's not only about competing commercially, it's as well about setting high standards for ourselves as companies, but as well as a huge part of the ecosystem, so the ground handlers, so that we can afterwards further collaborate with airlines associations and airport associations, so IATA or ACI. So we are looking at really reinforcing our association ASA to really ensure that we align as well on those topics. So there is a lot of things ongoing in the industry via our associations, but as well internally to push for the electrification and align on airports infrastructure, but as well on what airlines are expecting from us. So that's basically the setup in Swissport.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Just before we come to you, Paul, we have got some great questions in the Q&A and one in the chat as well. So we're going to have plenty of stuff to come to after you, Paul. So Jurian and Nadia, might be worth swatting up on those questions before we get to them. But Paul, again, Heathrow, absolutely critical to this. I mean, you're a giant sort of retail supermarket with runways. You've got lots of consumers flowing through. You've got lots of businesses you need to look after. You're quite important to the whole sort of fabric of sustainability for quite a lot of people and a lot of customers, I guess. And so you have quite a famous and strong net zero strategy and things like that as well. So perhaps you can let us into a little bit more on that.
Yeah, no, thanks. And you're right. I mean, pre the pandemic and when we were looking at growth from an expansion perspective, we had Heathrow 2.0, the first instance of that strategy, which was incredibly large and geared towards growth because it also assumed an expanding footprint of Heathrow. So it also covered all of the kind of the green corridors and everything else that we would be pushing out into. Obviously, with the pandemic, the expansion plans didn't go ahead. So we rewrote Heathrow 2.0 in February last year to give us a focused and honed strategy to the operation that we are delivering today and will be delivering for the next few years. And that strategy, again, similar to my peers, covered our net zero aspirations. It also covered things that are really important to us as Heathrow around social value in terms of employment and skills, jobs in the local community, equality and diversity, but also, especially following the pandemic and being such a major employer in the local area, making sure that we kickstart and redrive the thriving local economy that we're looking for with small businesses. So it's quite a broad strategy still in comparison. What we did as a procurement function was look at that and realize that there was a translation needed. So we had to find a way of bringing that to life for our partners and our supply chain. And at the same point, realizing that there'd be different measures of that for different parts of the supply chain. At Heathrow, we have kind of 23 major partners who deliver a large part of our estate, deliver a large part of our people, and control, in truth, a large part of our spend, and therefore, as by proxy, our emissions. So we started with them to translate into, similar to my peers, 5 pillars of net zero, social value, community, mitigating our local impacts and looking after our green spaces as well as the local economy, innovation, and behaviours, and not just behaviours in terms of everyone being nice to each other, but behaviours in terms of making sustainable choices as a business and demonstrating the behaviours to want to make sustainable choices as a business. So we've been through about a year now of pulling together what is the balanced scorecard and applying it to those partner organisations. And we're now getting to the point where we have the more granular measures that sit underneath that, and we're beginning and we are well through the engagement process. So we're about 86-87% way through baselining our suppliers against that scheme. I suppose one of the key and principal pieces of learning that we undertook, having done numerous performance schemes, whether it be sustainability or otherwise, and again, you'll excuse the travel and tourism reference, but we were getting quite used to getting given the holiday brochure but not being able to go on the holiday. So we decided we wanted to make sure that anything that came to us in a nice glossy was able to be tied back inextricably to a central performance of that company. If you're going to report your ED&I performance at Heathrow, it can't just be at Heathrow. It's got to play into your company's overall performance. If you're doing it for net zero and carbon reductions, it can't just be your team at Heathrow. It's got to be you as a business. And that, interestingly, caused a delay in putting this together, not only to extricate the measures that applied to Heathrow, but also because in some instances, some of those companies weren't recording those statistics centrally and doing those things. So it's driven some really good feedback and results from our supply chain in terms of engagement. And now we're looking to push that forward to get it contracted with those companies and to really push ahead on those agendas. But from a collaboration perspective and a doing it together and a value chain perspective, that's been something we've done collectively across that industry. And outside of those 23 partners, there's a version of the scorecard that applies for everyone else. So if you want to win work, if you want to be successful in tenders, which has scorecard now written through them, if you want to be successful working as our second tier into our first tier, those are the things that you need to have sell points on and be able to talk about in order to win work across the estate.
Really good, really good. So I think there's again another example of actually not only engaging suppliers, but being able to measure and metric it and give reward and prodding and notice and encouragement as part of that as well. Right, we've got some great questions, and it's not a surprise, I think, in this sector that there's a lot of comments and a lot of questions, because it is quite a topical thing, it's quite an emotive thing, and it's a lot of people questions. So I wanted to pick up Dominic's question first, because I feel like there's probably quite a few businesses listening in and sustainability professionals listening in that are thinking that you as companies actually have quite a considerable impact on the emissions of their business, certainly their scope 3 emissions with their employees flying around and so on and so forth. So Dominic asked that obviously, companies perhaps are wanting to reduce their emissions, what should they be thinking about in terms of sort of short to medium term things that you guys are working on to reduce their Scope 3 emissions and obviously your own emissions? What would be your thoughts, perhaps, for those companies listening in that are looking for help from you to reduce their emissions? So, Jurien, maybe we can come to you. What would you say to those companies that need your help?
Yeah, I'm sort of just reading Dominique's question, and good couple of points from our side there. I mean, 2 or 3 years ago at KLM, we actually said it's time to fly responsible, right? And at that time, we went out with that statement, and what we meant with it is, before you fly, have a real think whether you have to fly. And that was quite provocative for an airline, as you can imagine. Starting to challenge your own sort of business model. It got a lot of attention in the press. But to be honest, I think it shows our pioneering role that we'd like to have in the industry. Because ultimately, we want to make sure that we connect and provide great experience for people around the world, whether that's sort of business or holiday. But at that time, we also want to do it in a mindset where we care about this planet. So we've opened up our own mindset in our airlines to say, actually, we need to think differently about it. So number one, I would certainly say everybody sort of reflect on it. And one of the interesting things about sort of coming out of the pandemic and obviously more the hybrid working, we were sort of wondering with ourselves, is the traffic coming back? And I think the answer is yes, the traffic is coming back. Also, the business travel, probably not to the full 100%, a little bit lower. But I think in balance, that probably feels about right. So I think people are thinking more about whether they fly responsibly or not. Number two, I think we really need to make sure that this dilemma, can we fly sustainable, needs to be solved. And that's where we want to pioneer sustainable aviation and really the trajectory towards net zero. And the way we see that is sort of with the pillars that I just discussed before. We not only want to make a claim where we say 2050 we will be net zero, which is an amazing challenge for all of us, and that we don't have all the answers, but also already build a trajectory. And that's where we signed up to a science-based target as an airline to reduce our emissions already by 30% in 2030. And again, the way to get there is by gradually use more and more SAF, partner with the SAF industry to build that industry, because we're literally building the industry together with our partners. And in such a way, I think we can get there. But it's pioneering, partnering, collaborating in an amazing way that I think we haven't done before. And if we do that, I mean, SAF is reducing CO2 footprint by close to 80%. So if you couple all those things together and next generation planes driving 15 to 20% fuel efficiency plus SAF, I think we start to get a long way towards making flying a lot more sustainable.
Excellent. That's a good answer. And so I guess, I mean, it's about opening a dialogue with, the airline companies, the travel companies. It's about showing that there is demand for sustainable travel, about supporting sustainable aviation fuel initiatives, of course, as well. Flying less, I think, using it as a good excuse. I think that's that's a clear message if you need to, or certainly questioning your decision to fly. I think that's probably the best way to put it. Paul, I want to come to you with one of these next questions, which is about obviously the EU's apparent push to reduce short-haul flights and perhaps other methods, rail and other opportunities, obviously more electric vehicles on the roads now. What does that mean for Heathrow and how you think and feel in the fact that there are other options, there are other opportunities for companies, and perhaps where legislation plays a role?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll probably just do one build on the previous
Please do.
one as well, which was there is the opportunity for businesses now who are booking flights to seek out flights that are being flown under sustainable aviation fuels, and that by itself will actually, excuse the phrase, fuel the drive towards sustainable aviation fuels. So, the best answer ever when you are a consumer is be a discerning consumer, and demand what you want. And if you want to contribute towards that agenda, then demand that and seek to demand that the flights be done on sustainable aviation fuel. Again, demand pending. It's not quite a simple, straightforward answer as everyone can just do it at the moment. But we build that momentum if we keep asking for these things. The rail connectivity is a fantastic thing because it will reduce some of the shorter haul flights that are required domestically. I think people are of a mindset that airports and aviation would be against that. Absolutely not. I think everyone recognises the existential challenge that sits in all of this, away from profits and market share. I also think it's a virtuous thing because high-speed rail means better connection invariably into airports as a result of those rail routes. It means less car journeys on the road. It means better surface access into airports. And as per Jurian's comment, it means that people can take choices around whether or not they need to fly with more options available to them. So no, I think what's true is in aviation, we don't see a situation where people will not want to be connected to the world through flight. So I don't think we need to fear or worry about high-speed rail connections, etc. As a matter of fact, I think it's something that collectively we should embrace, support, and work out how actually we can take the benefits of that to take single occupancy or otherwise car journeys off of the road and put them into public transport.
I do get the feel that. No, sorry, go on, Jane.
No, maybe building on Paul, a few examples, where things are really changing. Yeah, so in France, domestic flights for less than 2.5 hours are not operated anymore. That's a real significant change making impact. In the Netherlands, doing that would be complicated because you're long beyond the borders of Netherlands if you fly 2.5 hours. But there, of course, we are really implementing now the first air rail tickets, for instance, from Brussels to Amsterdam by train, with a seamless journey to then fly on from Amsterdam onwards. So yes, it's very much sort of part of our thinking on our strategy to create a space as well for intermodal.
Yeah, sounds good. Nadia, as the sustainability professional on the panel here, you must look at the way that the industry is changing and the way that consumers are thinking and the way that COVID has impacted it, and see, get a sense of what's ahead for you as well.
Yes, definitely, and just to echo as well what my colleagues were mentioning, I see as well a lot of initiatives that are coming from as well governments and states. We are here based in Switzerland. I see some cities that are actually incentivizing the use of the train versus flying, giving more access to obviously all the facilities that are more eco-friendly, which I think is an area of collaboration, and another one that goes beyond obviously our industry as such, but goes beyond and look really at the whole end-to-end ecosystem, which I think is a good progression. From a Swissport perspective, one of the things that we are as well looking at is really to see how ourselves we can participate along the way to the customer journey and push for more use of the train before actually flying. So I just take an example, and I think in Heathrow, this is already in place. You tell me, Paul, if I'm mistaken, but we are collaborating as well with a startup, Airporter, that is looking at the customer journey to really facilitate the use of the train versus taxi, for instance, to come to the airport by taking care of the luggage, at departure and arrival. So this is a small, it's a small contribution to the overall customer journey, but I think this is actually how we should look at it. There is no bad progress. There is no small progress. This is all about how do you stick together the big game changers, such as the use of SAF, as Jurjen was mentioning, or as well, how do you look at it from an overall perspective where you have probably hundreds of contributions that will help you and help as well the consumers in the end to reduce CO2 emissions. It's a lot of small initiatives that will participate as well to the overall journey towards less carbon emissions.
Excellent. Now, I'm conscious we've got 3 minutes left, and Simon, who was going to facilitate this session, but unfortunately lost his voice through tonsillitis, so I've had to step in and do an okay job at it. So he has asked a question about circular economy being implemented into aviation. So bearing in mind we've only got a couple of minutes, is anyone particularly want to pick that one up? Because it sounds like it was something worth covering, the idea of embedding those more circular thinking into aviation.
So within, sorry, Jurjen, if you want to go.
No, you go for it, Paul.
So we are looking at the circular aspect of our piece. I mean, and across a spectrum of things, whether it be re-reviewing logistics and waste within logistics and how we bring that back into the airport rather than buying new, which has been a legacy issue of many airports. But also actually making sure that in the design at the forefront of construction or projects or programs, we're considering the materials at that stage of things with reuse, repurpose, being at the forefront, and the kind of the higher up that the better. So when we start looking at design, we're looking at what happens at end of life for those materials and what's the opportunity. So again, given the time, I'll probably leave it there, but it doesn't just start with looking at our waste, it starts in our design processes now.
Good. That sort of mindset shift in your procurement team, I think, is helped by the nature of the business you're in and the nature of the world you're in. So hopefully that helps. Jurjen, you were going to add some thoughts?
No, maybe a couple of examples how we sort of apply circularity. I mean, certainly if you think about our MRO business, I think there's a long-standing history of used materials procurement rather than buying new. So that in itself is a very circular thought. But also very recently we had a sort of an exciting experience because we were sort of doing our selection process for our new uniforms supplier. And in fact, one of the suppliers said, unless KLM in this case committed to a circular solution, they didn't want to take part in the selection process. And that's sort of almost the upside down in the world. And to cut a long story short, eventually we have selected this supplier. We are driving a solution that is 90% circular with a continuous improvement journey to get to 100%. And I think this is the new mindset that we need, because I think there's so many challenges. We often talk about net zero, and I don't think we have all the answers at the moment, to be honest, but I think we have the ambition. We understand the urgency to drive things forward. We want to pioneer there and then have partners like that in our supply chain with commodities thought-provoking statement, we were pleasantly surprised in a way.
Excellent. We better stop it there. But panel, thank you so much. Nadia, you've been excellent. Jurian, Paul, really appreciate your efforts as well. Lots of more questions we could cover. What to do about private jets? All sorts of different questions that we could have had on. Paul, if you get a chance, and you've got a link to your scorecard, I don't know if you can pop that into the chat. It might be too late, but otherwise I'm sure people can get in touch with you and maybe get a copy of that. But one thing that I think I've reflected on listening to this is that your world is more collaborative than I ever imagined. It is absolutely inextricably linked. Nadia, it feels like you're at the center of the value chain as well, and it's critical that you're all working together. But it feels like you're completely all aware of the elephants in the room around aviation and emissions, and you're actively facing those challenges and those questions and coming up with answers. So I think that's really positive as well. I think that's a really important thing for businesses to be hearing as well as consumers. Huge thanks. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Do put in the poll if you enjoyed this session. Please join us for the sessions that I've got coming up. I'm going back to the agenda to work out what I'm doing for the next 12 hours. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of it. And thanks, Paul. Thanks, Nadia. Thanks, Jurian. Really appreciate your help.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And do